Hello and welcome to the Your Financial Planning Maestro podcast. This podcast is aimed at financial advice professionals all around the world, but particularly in the UK, where we follow the journey of many hundreds of individual paraplanners, investment managers and financial advisors in becoming financial planning professionals and gaining their international certified financial planner license. We will be talking to a number of individuals about their journey to become CFP professionals and touching on other aspects of the profession along the way. I hope that you enjoy our podcast. Marker. Hello and welcome. I'm Jackie Lockie, your financial planning maestro. And today we are talking about all things relating to the Certified Financial Planner designation. And I'm joined by a very special guest who has recently become a CFP professional in the UK himself. And that is Dave Vance, who is a senior paraplanner at Bloomsbury Wealth. Hello, Dave.
Hi, Jackie.
Thanks very much for joining us today. Now, we are going to get straight in because I've got a big list of questions to ask you as usual. But before we get into the nitty gritty of how you got into financial planning, how specifically you found the CFP and the level 7, the CISI level 7 case study, let's give us a quick potted version of how you got to be from your initially coming into the financial advice world into working at Bloomsbury.
Sure. So I fell into the industry, I think like quite a few people do, completely by accident. So around age 22, 23 after university, I started at Capita, wanted to do my investment operations certificate first module, just to pass probation. Fast forward 4 or 5 years down the line, I'm looking for a new job and they're looking for someone with at least the investment operations certificate, but they're finding it hard. So they start looking for people with anything to do with it. So I got my first job in the industry actually with Sanlam, the South African investment management firm.
Yep.
Worked there as a trainee investment manager for just under 3 years. I did my IOC and IMC there. And then because I was dealing with advisors day in, day out, I slowly got to know what they do on their side of the fence. And it sounded a lot more interesting than what I was doing on the investment side, which was just a small slither of what makes up a holistic plan. So I eventually decided I was going to take a step back and go back to be a trainee paraplanner. And I started with a small company in Croydon called Evolve. And I stayed there just over a year and then moved on to Punter Southall, where it was a little bit more corporate and a little bit more gung-ho in getting me more exams under my belt, doing my ROs, and I started down the advanced diploma route before I actually changed companies where they were looking more at the certified or the CFP. I took a break from the exams at that point because I was a little bit examined out, and it's only recently that I decided I was in a pretty good position to have a real crack at the level 7.
Wow. Yes, well, indeed. Yeah, I completely empathise on the definitely examined out. I think there are lots of our listeners that are probably feeling that way right now and maybe haven't started on their level 7 case study yet. And I kind of thinking, I'm not sure I even want to go there. My headspace is going to let me go there anytime soon. But we get into all of that in a second. So tell me about why you decided, why was now a good time to embark on the CFP?
It had been a couple of years since I meaningfully took an exam, and I think once you've let your mind calm down and forget about what doing these exams feels like, you kind of lower yourself into a full sense of security and think, this time I'm going to be well prepared, I'm going to do everything by the book and it's going to be easy. Of course, it didn't work out that way. It was a lot tougher than I thought it was going to be. In terms of just the scope of the actual case study. But it just felt like the right time. I was looking to become an advisor as well, so I wanted to have that under my belt in terms of being able to go and see clients and tell them that I'm CFP qualified. And also my company itself actually requires you to have the CFP to advise. So instead of waiting to the point where I wanted to advise and then getting the exam, I thought I'd get the exam and then I'm ready to go.
Yes, absolutely. It's kind of more on your terms then, isn't it? If you're ready to do it now.
Yeah, exactly.
Makes more sense. So tell us a little bit about what your approach was. So were you already, did you have to do the level 6 exam with the CISI first and then the level 7? Or did you have enough CII exams in order to do the bridge assessment?
No, I had to do the multiple choice, which wasn't actually too bad. I thought it was fairly kind. It didn't really go into the very niche areas and find the worst calculations they could think of, which can happen. It was a lot more of what you would expect to experience in the industry, and because I'd worked as a paraplanner for quite a few years, it wasn't too difficult to bring up those kinds of exactly. I think if you do it earlier in your career, maybe if you're only 2 or 3 years in experience as a paraplanner, you might find it a little bit more difficult, just because it's not so much knowledge that's on the tip of your tongue. It might be things that you're currently still learning or getting used to. So I think my experience at the time helped me in quite a big way. But my approach wasn't as structured as I I planned it would be. It was a lot more fitting it around the time I had when I was at home with my family. Any time I had managed to mark out for myself during the week just by getting a little bit ahead of my work to allow me to do a couple of hours while I was working. Luckily, my boss is very supportive with exams, so as long as I got my work done, I was allowed to work on my case study, so it was an incentive to get my work done quicker. So it was I think the downside to that was I was picking it up and putting it down a lot, and because of that, the first 15-20 minutes you're really just refamiliarizing yourself with what you've already done. And I found as well doing that you're then revising yourself quite a few times before you even get to the point of writing the next bit, because you spot all the errors you didn't spot last time. So it was a very 1 step back, 2 step forwards methodology. But one thing that was extremely helpful with your course, Jackie, was the guidance around really hammering down the assumptions and the cash flow analysis before you put any words on paper. My usual mentality is a bit gung-ho, just jump in and see what happens. But as I went on with this, I did get a warning from someone who had done it before to listen to you and to do what the teacher said. So I gritted my teeth and thought I'll be the good student. And
toe the line.
it definitely helped, because there were times when I was looking at my cash flow for the 100th time, thinking, right, I should really get on with writing this, and then I'd spot a very innocuous but a big error, and I thought if I had started writing, everything I would have written would have been absolute garbage. So having it more secure when you come to write is definitely the way forward. And then the actual writing stage was pretty simple.
And did you find that, because you're a bit of a closet Excel spreadsheet whiz, aren't you? Let's face it. Yeah, well, it's like confession time around here with these podcasts these days. So how did you approach the case study with respect to, obviously with everybody, there were easier bits and there are tougher bits to kind of get your head around. So did you find the Excel stuff, a little bit more straightforward? There'll probably be lots of people shouting at their microphones now, going, "You lucky little devil." But what about on the flip side of that? What about the tougher areas where you kind of thought, "Oh gosh, I need to kind of go for a walk, get some fresh air"? Where were those kind of highs and lows for you?
I think the counterintuitive thing, as someone who's worked as a paraplanner for quite a few years, is firms and the FCA, they put a lot of onus on what a client receives should be quite simple direct, not too much waffle, not too long. And the case study is almost the reverse of that. You're explaining every part of it, every calculation, the history of whatever the tax wrapper might be, the pros, the cons, the taxation, all your calculations, the cash flow analysis, which do go into client reports, but they're condensed down to the message and the straightforward delivery. So at times I felt like I was going against what I've been taught as someone who works as a paraplanner. But once I got used to the idea that although I'm addressing it to the client and the pronouns are being used as if you're addressing a client, what you're really doing is showing the examiner what you know, and you're showing them the depth of your knowledge, you're showing them your rationale, your ability to reason. So once I kind of got past the mental block of I'm not doing this report as I've been taught to do it, it became a lot easier just to write directly to the examiner.
Yeah, yeah. And I think a lot of that is because we, as financial planners, I certainly used to fall into this trap as well many years ago when I was giving advice, that you kind of skip to the answer, don't you? You skip
Yes.
to the recommendation. So you still quite often think through those alternative solutions. But actually, like you say, too much waffle, the clients just don't read those kinds of plans.
Yeah.
And therefore there's no point in wasting your time, essentially. But I think also, there are a lot of financial advice firms out there who only deal with perhaps one client objective or maybe two in a year. Whereas obviously with this case study, you've got 4 big ones going on all at the same time, haven't you? So I think, that's where that level 7, the master's degree level comes into play. It's that kind of 3D jigsaw puzzle, isn't it, really?
Yeah, exactly. And I think the other difficulty was the amount of tinkering around the cash flow,
Yes.
purely because the amount of information, the amount of potential traps along the way that you could fall into if one number just isn't right or one reference box doesn't reference the right cell.
Yes.
So there was a lot of, I guess, anxiety of just letting go and accepting that it was okay, but the trouble I had was every time I looked a little bit closer, I found another mistake. So I was really kind of making myself more and more used to the fact that the more I look, the more mistakes I find. So it was tricky to just walk away from it and say that it is done.
Yes.
But at some point you do have to, unfortunately.
Yeah, and I think also there's this notion. I think certainly when I was the power planner, which was even longer ago. I'm not even going to tell you how many years ago that one was, Dave. But there is this. I don't know whether we do it ourselves as paraplanners, but I certainly used to go into meetings or write a report with the expectation that I had the answers as it was expected of me as a paraplanner to have all of the answers at my fingertips, essentially, as if I'd swallowed, every technical workbook known to man. And I kind of, I don't know whether, quite a few other paraplanners that I've spoken to kind of felt the pressure of that at various points in their career. And I wonder whether some of that comes into play, because then it drives you to feel that there must be the perfect answer to this case study, when actually there isn't, is there?
Yeah, and that's definitely true. I think, especially if you work at one firm, there's normally a not single correct answer, but there's the one answer that most people give in certain situations. So you can kind of accustom yourself to that. Whereas when you're working on your own, you've created your own assumptions. You've created your own theory on how you think it should be best addressed, what important factors are important factors, what are less so. So instead of an advisor coming down and downloading to you what they feel is the most important and what areas they should focus on and you should focus on, you're having to do that all yourself. So it's a good practice if you're a paraplanner thinking of becoming an advisor, because you don't have that safety net, and you don't have that passing down of information. It's all coming from you directly. So it's a good exercise in that if you are thinking of becoming an advisor.
Yes, yes. And so we're going to, while we're on that subject, how do you think that looking back now, it has changed your approach, both, in your day-to-day work at the moment as a senior power planner, but also maybe how it might help you or has helped you develop to be to broaden your skills for, for being more client-facing in the future?
Yeah, so it didn't open up my eyes too much really, and I think that's because I've worked for quite a few different firms, big corporates, little companies, active, passive, restricted, whole of market. So I've seen the different types of advisors and advice firms there are, and I've been trying to refine what I believe is the best way of doing things, and because of that I went and found a firm that supported my beliefs in that with Bloomsbury Wealth. So when I came to write it, Bloomsbury is actually very centred around the CFP in terms of the way they give advice. So the way I'd been working here was actually very similar to the way that the case study is set out in terms of your methodology of breaking down what the client needs, their goals and objectives, how the advice letter would flow, action plans, things like that. They're things that I do use every day. But as I said earlier, here it's a lot more refined, it's a lot more client-facing friendly, whereas this wasn't so much.
No.
So it was a good way for me to practice what I've learned, but it wasn't too much of a learning experience for me.
No, not too many new things to hit you all at the same time.
No, which is good. Having been in the
Yes.
industry for this many years, I think if I found a load of things I'd never seen before, I would have been a little bit
Yes.
worried I haven't been doing my job right.
A bit unnerving, isn't it? I've had conversations with people in the past where they kind of go, Jackie, I'm starting to question my whole being about whether I should be in the financial planning profession. And I'm like, oh, hang on a minute, don't go. But it can be quite unnerving, I guess, if for people who perhaps don't have that level of experience and, the kind of exposure of the CFP process and that 6-step process in itself, is new. And so it's all about, when you're approaching it, it's about thinking through, well, actually, what can I bring to the table for this assessment those skills that I already have in my kit bag, and you already have lots of skills in your kit bag, so it benefited you. But so there's always a cautionary but round here. And so, how did you get on with your first assessment?
It was the most bare bones it could possibly have been without being rejected. So
Okay. Why was that? A bit more therapy coming along shortly.
Yeah, I didn't. I underestimated it. I overestimated myself, I think, to a degree. So I thought it would be a lot simpler. I thought writing the assumptions would be a breeze. Finding the information would be a breeze. And that all took a lot longer than I thought. The cash flow took longer than I thought, which meant very quickly I felt things run away from me.
And then you haven't got much written down then, have you, at that point still?
Exactly. Yeah. And once I realised I wasn't going to be putting in a full submission where I'd get some proper feedback that would be useful, I just tried to concentrate on the cash flow, get my assumptions right. And my first submission was essentially a front page with a contents table, and then each page just had the header of what I was going to write, and then my assumptions at the end. So my my feedback from the marker was needs to begin, needs to start the case study.
Fair comment,
So,
I guess.
yeah, I mean, I couldn't really take much from it. So
No.
I was hoping you'd have a quick flick through my assumptions and give me a bit of help, but there was nothing forthcoming. So all I did was, once I submitted that first submission, I acted like I hadn't submitted anything and just carried on writing it while they were marking it.
Yeah.
So by the time it did come back for the second submission, it was no surprise that I got a big fat 0. I might have got 1 mark for putting my name on there. So I was actually in a good position by the time the next window opened up to do the second submission before I needed to hand it in. I had a good amount of time, and I'd actually pushed forward my write-up quite a lot. I was about 2/3 done when I got to the point where they passed back my first submission, and then I could spend real time just really concentrating on making sure I'm not making any stupid errors, making sure that I've explained everything thoroughly and clearly, and it was a lot more comfortable, the second one. I think because I'd realised from the first submission just how much I'd underestimated it. So I think my first bit of advice would always be just get on with it. Just
Yes.
rip the band-aid off and start.
Yes, you got to
Yeah.
go. I always say, I think I say it every course, I always say that in order to get to the other end, you have to go through the middle. There is no wiggling around the outside, no sidestepping the issue. It is straight through the middle, or you just don't get there. And it's the same kind of thing, isn't it? Ripping that band-aid off and just diving headlong into it.
Yeah, but remember, the assumptions and cash flow first, not into the written stuff.
Assumptions and cash flow first. Man after my own heart. Excellent, well done. And so, what happened after that?
After that, I breathed out for the first time in about a year. I started growing my hair again. I saw sunlight. It was quite a wonderful time. A lot of relief, in all honesty, and I think the big difference between the first and the second is the second I felt it had a chance of passing, whereas obviously the first I knew it wasn't. So I could relax a little bit more, and when I finally got the email to confirm, it was a bit of a surprise because I set myself up to expect a third submission, so I wouldn't be so disappointed. So it was a pleasant surprise when I actually passed on the second time.
That's lovely, and congratulations.
Thank you very much.
Well done.
Thanks.
So tell us a little bit about how long it took you think, overall to pass. Let's include all of the time that you've spent for both first and second submissions.
I think it's tricky because I didn't have a genuine routine, and it was grabbing time when I could. I'm not too sure, but I would put it between 60 and 100 hours comfortably, maybe more. I know that's quite a broad range, but I genuinely couldn't tell you how long I spent on it. I just know that
you just kept going until you passed.
Yeah, exactly. It was write until I couldn't write, read until I couldn't read, and then start it again the next day as well.
Yeah. And did you find that there were points during perhaps the Excel spreadsheet build or the write-up of the plan where you kind of thought, do you know, I kind of need to go and get some fresh air and just kind of organise my thoughts, because there's so much to hold in your head with this case study, isn't there, that if you don't get it out on paper somewhere or make some notes along the way, you kind of can't see the wood for the trees after a point, can you?
I was a little bit the opposite. Once I got the ball rolling, I didn't really want it to stop, because I said earlier that putting it down and picking it up probably extended the amount of time I worked on it, because there was so much time reassociating yourself with what you'd already written and then reformulating what you're going to say next, because last time you wrote it you might have thought, oh, I'm definitely going to go down this route, and then you come back and look at it and go, well, actually, what about this route? Well, I didn't really think about that last time. So then you'll spend 20 minutes redoing your calculations to test your new theory, to see if it was right or wrong, and then you find out your first idea was actually the better one, so you go back and you've spent half an hour doing absolutely nothing. So it was it was an interesting method. I would definitely try and be more organised than I was.
Next time. Oh, there won't be a next time. Phew, he says.
No, not for me.
No chance. So just give us everybody, all of our listeners, a little bit of advice about it for those who are about to start their journey to become a CFP professional today. Do you have any tips that you could share with us?
I think if you've been working as a paraplanner in the industry for a few years, don't lean too much on what you already do at companies. Have a look at the structure of the CISI gave a template case study. I use that in large part for mine in terms of understanding how expansively you need to talk on subjects and things like that. So that's a good place just to read through, and it will probably feel quite alien compared to what you do in your day-to-day work. It may not in some areas, but have a read of that and understand what that actually feels like, so you can build a good framework for what you're going to write without just going straight in with a blank piece of paper. What I already said earlier about getting the assumptions and cash flow done in the first instance, really make sure you feel that it's bulletproof by the time you come to write, and it will make your writing a lot easier. I'd also say don't worry too much about getting the first submission passed. It's a nice thing to do. One, you don't have to spend more time on it, but also I understand from a cost perspective it costs a fair whack to resubmit every time. I think it's about 560 quid or so. Yeah. So it's not a cheap thing to resubmit. But having passed on my second try and having such a woeful first submission, I think just making sure you are secure in what you're going to say, and then just making sure you flesh that out properly instead of trying to rush it to get a first time pass on the first submission. Really make sure your calculations, cash flows are nailed on, and then everything else will follow quite seamlessly after that. And then the last one would be, again, counterintuitive to if you're an actual paraplanner, but over-explain things rather than under-explaining them or assuming any level of knowledge. It's always, you don't have to go into textbook level detail on explaining the technicalities of things, but at least mention that they exist. And I think if you do all those, you'll be in a pretty good position, I think.
Yeah. Excellent. Well, Dave, we are out of time. It's been an absolute pleasure to talk to you, and I'm sure that all of the tips and advice that you have shared along the way, our listeners are going to find invaluable. So thanks very much for joining me, and thanks for taking the time to talk to us.
That's lovely. Thank you, Jackie. And thank you again for your course. It was a huge help. I also say, I guess as advice, get onto your course. Huge help with the cash flow planning if anyone is struggling with that, and also the do's and don'ts was a huge help as well, just hearing how other people have fallen into some traps that they didn't know existed. So having them mark them for you was very helpful.
My pleasure. It's really interesting, isn't it, to listen to different people who have different experiences of gaining their Certified Financial Planner certification, or maybe developing the financial planning profession at large. If you know anybody who you think might be interested in listening to any of these podcasts, then please do pass on our details. That's it from me. I hope you've enjoyed today's episode. See you again soon. Bye for now.